My guests today are Democratic former state senator Dee Dee Feldman and Republican former state representative Justine Fox-Young. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Crime was the #1 focus of the governor's speech on Tuesday. Lujan Grisham came back to some ideas that she had pushed before unsuccessfully. Tougher penalties for convicted felons caught with guns, longer sentences for drug dealers, a reform of New Mexico's criminal competency laws, and she also sprinkled in a little riff about making it easier to keep people in jail before trial. Dee Dee, is there any reason that we should expect the governor to have a different outcome with her party this session?
Yes, it looks like there's been some talk between the governor and the Democratic leadership, and they're on the same page in terms of behavioral health funding. She mentioned that she wanted to devote, I think it was $100 million for behavioral health expansion. And I did notice that that was one of the first bills that was introduced in the Senate. Also, I think there have been pretty extensive hearings on the governor's proposals from the special session in the Courts and Criminal Justice Interim Committee. And remember, the Democrats said these ideas needed discussion and vetting, particularly the competency part and the involuntary commitment. I was very impressed with the governor's statement, which seemed to be directed to the Democratic leadership, that, you know, her whole career, and even before she was governor, was focused on generational poverty in New Mexico and inequality, and she's, you know, touted the many advances New Mexico had made in that direction. And yet, she said, that very progress is threatened, and the communities that we want to empower are threatened by crime.
Yeah.
And so I think she said, basically, I understand the civil liberties questions that many have about these issues, but we can come together to do the things that she and the legislature and the Republicans especially have been promoting.
I thought it was a well-crafted speech. A good team of writers working on that speech. There was definitely some smoothness to it. But Justine, you know, I was amused too to hear her say, "You can applaud for that." This is an applause line. Go ahead and applaud. But she did get the Republicans on their feet a few times, agreeing with her. She got a standing ovation after she mentioned stiffer penalties for violent repeat offenders. What do you think it says about the shift in the political scene that the governor is now playing a tune that the Republicans have had in their songbook for years?
She was very conciliatory. She was very congratulatory to the legislature. She is concerned about legacy and the way she wants to be perceived, I think. There were some notable things missing from her speech. I guess that's what was most obvious to me. I mean,
We're going to come back to that.
And I'll speak to the crime bills, but she intentionally and deliberately did not talk about Trump and the inauguration, and instead she was speaking to the Republicans, and on the crime package in particular. To your question, will she have a different result? I would be surprised if she has a different result, but I think the perception may be different. And I guess the question that's more interesting to me and more important, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I'm in court all the time on these preventative detention hearings, and so I see how it's actually playing out on the streets. Will it make a difference? Will it make a difference? Will we have safer streets in Albuquerque, statewide, with any of these measures? And I think the answer is no. And the reason is these agencies are so overtaxed. They're so overburdened. The caseload is too high. and they are taking every single case to a hearing. They are locking everybody up. For any case where there's a perception that there was a gun involved, you're going to do 5 days in jail, and then you're going to go to a hearing, and many of them are going to get out. So we're not focusing on the worst of the worst, the repeat offenders. The DA's office is not able to afford the resources to the. So yes, those were applause lines, and the governor wanted applause lines. She wants commendation. She wants to have the feeling going into the session that we're working together. I don't know that she's going to have a really different result than she did on the failed special session on those bills.
You took my question straight away from me about whether it's going to make a difference. Dee Dee, the governor has a background in public health, right? And she wants to apply that approach to some of these issues. During her speech, she brought up investing in behavioral health, which you mentioned earlier, and that behavioral health being substance abuse, mental health issues, things like that, as a way to improve public safety. But the Democrats have had 6 years to fix the problem that they keep reminding us happened during the administration of Republican Governor Susana Martinez. Is this public health kind of framing and approach what it's going to take to fix the system, to get everybody on board?
Well, it's a combination. But I do think that the behavioral health stuff and the infrastructure for adequate treatment and maybe sort of short-term housing and programs for people who are homeless now is a big part of the solution, along with those measures that have been advanced before. But I'm thinking, based on what Justine was just talking, really what it comes down to is resources and money for the police department, for the district attorneys, for the public defenders, for those in the sort of criminal justice infrastructure, maybe for the judicial system as well.
Well, and I'm not necessarily saying we need more resources. I think we need to do more with what we have. And for instance, this administration has made some progress with the help of advocates and litigators on providing Suboxone and methadone to folks who are incarcerated. That makes a huge difference for people coming out. That makes a huge difference in terms of recidivism. There are a lot of things we can do with the resources we have now if we'll sit down and do it.
And that is a public health approach. Those things that you mentioned, Suboxone, needle exchange, that kind of thing. Those are public health measures that have been resisted in the past by the Republicans for sort of moral reasons, or that they're enabling criminals and so on. I'm hoping that kind of time is passing, and we recognize that that's really part of the solution.
And those you don't get big accolades for those things, right, but they happen behind the scenes and they make a huge difference. So I agree, Dee Dee.
You mentioned homelessness, and the governor brought that up, talking about housing and homelessness, which she sort of was weaving in with the approach to public safety. But she didn't talk about the causes of the housing shortage, right? What do Republicans think about solving some of the barriers for developing more housing now?
I don't know what Republicans in the legislature think. I was struck by her references to the need for housing, which I think everybody agrees. We have a shortage. And the total failure to talk about Trump's tariffs, the things that are going to further drive up the cost of housing, especially given the trade we do with Mexico. So, I mean, I don't even know where it falls on a philosophical spectrum anymore. If Republicans are going to be for tariffs and for driving up these costs, I don't know what the Republicans think, yeah, but certainly we need to address the root causes here in Albuquerque. And that comes back to fentanyl, substance abuse, really, really serious pervasive problems that we're seeing that we've got to address in the jails and in prison and on the streets. And I support the governor in those initiatives in trying to develop affordable housing, although I think we do have a really large homeless population here in Albuquerque that does not
interested.
No, people aren't going to buy into that. And so you can continue to throw money at the problem and you're not going to get anywhere with the big percentage.
Which brings us to the governor mentioning, again, her idea of forcing some people to get treatment for substance abuse and mental health issues. She said saving lives and supporting families is clearly warranted in these extreme circumstances where the least restrictive interventions simply don't work. Dee Dee, this has raised Democrats' hackles before, and there are some constitutional issues. Do you think they're going to put up a fight on this again?
I think it'll be a sticking point. Yes,
It's not going anywhere.
I think it'll be a sticking point. I think the rest of the program is a go, frankly, but that one, and maybe even competency, has a shot of being reformed. But that one in particular, I think, is going to be very difficult. I mean, there are other approaches besides involuntary commitment, which is what this is. There has been a lot of talk recently about developing a Medicaid waiver for homeless people who are also mentally ill, of the type of the DD waiver, so that federal funds could be used to create some kind of intermediary housing with intensive case management. That was not mentioned in the speech. That's, I know, an idea that's being talked about a lot now in the legislature as well as amongst the advocates. So I think that might be something that we'll hear more about.
Now, Justine, you mentioned that there are going to be people on the street who are just not interested in treatment. They're not interested in taking medications for mental health. They're not interested in dealing with it. It's thorny because we've got this really resistant problem, but there are civil rights issues in locking people up.
There are, and while many advocates may really wish that we could get people the treatment that they feel they need, there are a lot of people, and I have clients who are resistant to it, and it's just a no-go. But I think there is a large segment of the population, people who are newly on the streets, people who are just barely hanging on, who do need help. And I think there are other ways to address that: job growth, improving the economy, cleaning up the streets in terms of making them safer. I mean, you can't drive down First just north of I-40 anymore at noon to go to a business because you can't get past the encampments, and there are people with weapons in the streets. So there are some pretty basic issues that our government needs to address that do not present civil rights and constitutional issues that I think should be first. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. But that is a really difficult problem, and I don't think that involuntary confinement is the answer.
Thank you, Justine and Dee Dee. And now we are going to turn to the Capitol. I had a chance to catch up with several lawmakers after the governor's State of the State speech to ask about some of these big issues, including public safety. After that, we'll be right back here to talk about some of the non-crime issues that lawmakers will tackle.